This story begins with an ordinary passerby who asked a policeman to help a girl in a nearby alley. The policeman sitting in the car replied with a smile that he would take care of it right away. After her request, the girl looked anxiously in the direction of the poor man in the alley. She thought she would be rescued soon, but the policeman announced to his colleague that their working day was over. The worried colleague pointed to the crowd around the defenseless girl and said that they should hurry, but the guy objected and added that there were too many attackers and they would not be able to cope. This crowd will play with the victim and let her go, so there is no point in sending help. He explained that this was not the first time, and they should not create problems, but his dialogue was interrupted by a stranger's request to let the girl go. Concerned cops began to follow the next events closely, and it turned out that it was one brave policeman who confidently stood in front of the crowd of dangerous men. The head of the robbers asked what kind of impudence he was showing, and the young man repeated his request to let the girl go with a confident look. Laughing, the gang leader walked away from the girl and headed toward the fearless policeman. He blew the smoke of his cigarette into the boy's face and asked him what he would do if the answer was no. And without hesitation, the policeman punched the brazen man in the jaw. The cigarette fell out of his hands. The criminal was lying on the ground holding his face. The policeman continued to watch him closely. This unexpected action caused incredible surprise among all the people around. The policeman said that if they refused, they would have to suffer at his hands. The angry gang was ready for a fight and warmed up their fists. With hateful shouts, they rushed at the brave boy who stood alone. But without another word, he struck his attacker in the face again, and continued to follow the gang that rushed to fight against him. The police officers could not believe that their colleague was continuing the unequal fight with such courage. Holding his head, the leader of the gang called the policeman a scumbag, and he could not accept it, so he reached into his pocket for his weapon. The man pulled out a knife and said he would kill his opponent. The confident guy asked his opponent if he had ever killed anyone in his life. The enraged bandit replied that he had killed people many times and that his opponent would be next. But the policeman approached his face without any fear and said, holding the attacker's hand, that he would not dare. He could see the weakness and fear of murder in his eyes. With cold sweat on his face, the attacker said he had the strength to do it. In response, the policeman asked him to kill him if he was really not afraid. The frightened bandit held a knife to the policeman's heart, but did not dare to kill his opponent. Holding the bandit's hand, the guy warned that someone had to die in this fight. Fear filled the offender's heart, and he threw the knife to the ground, and then asked the policeman who the hell he was. Taking his opponent firmly by the shoulder, the brave guy replied that he was the one who catches scum on the streets. The bandit screamed in pain as he looked at his enemy. The events took place 1 week before the present in Inchinport. A guy approached one of the containers located here and opened it. Inside were men with various weapons in their hands. The killer, surnamed Bai Guang, said that all the fighters were finally gathered. Maple Leaf, preparing his knife for battle, asked with a smile what took his colleague so long. He asked why his friend took on this job, calling it his last mission. With a serious look, the guy asked his colleagues what kind of mission awaited him. The white-haired guy replied that Buddha asked him to work with him. Then one of the bandits suddenly attacked Bai Guang in the back with a chain. He managed to react and grab the chain from the enemy, and then threw the attacker to the floor of the container. Clutching the chain in his hands, he asked the bandits what the hell they were doing. The white-haired guy replied that he was just doing his job. With a sly smile, he said that the name of his mission was to remove the legendary killer Bai Guang from his job, and with that, the crowd of men rushed into action. The first of the attackers furiously lunged with a knife. However, he was easily caught by a trophy chain and received a knee right in the face. The next attacker was about to strike with an axe, but Bai dodged it and counterattacked with a kick to the opponent's neck. After dealing with 2 attackers, he identified a 3rd target with a knife, and he easily dodged the first stab and wrapped a chain around the opponent's neck. Maple Leaf watched this one-sided battle closely. Bai Guang asked his enemy why he had recruited such weaklings for such a serious mission. Taking his weapon out of his pocket, he admitted his mistake, but holding the pistol in his hands, he said that he did not respect such weapons in such battles. He said he was just following Buddha's orders. He didn't like to clean up after killing people with such weapons. But this time he had no other choice. Buddha told Bai Guang that after this last mission, he would be free. Being deceived, the guy could not contain his hatred. He could not accept that it would end like this. Saying goodbye to his friend, Leaf wished him good luck in hell. Angry Guang, without having no other option, attacked the man with a gun. A shot rang out, and the container in the port was full of blood. Meanwhile, a man sitting in the temple dressed as a monk saw that he was receiving a phone call. He answered the phone and learned that his errand had been successfully completed. But Buddha didn't answer and looked at his phone in surprise, to find that the voice was different from the one he was expecting. The monk realized that it was the victim he had ordered. He replied that he was just about to light the last candle in his memory, and then asked how the hitman had found out about this ritual. The guy asked if the monk was in his temple, and Buddha replied that he was, and then said that Guang was unlikely to be able to go up to him, as dozens of armed thugs were already waiting for him. Bai Guang said he would meet him soon. Then he asked his boss to open the door and threw the phone on the ground. The temple guard said that his boss Buddha was not accepting visitors at the moment. The killer replied that someone who kidnaps children and turns them into murderers cannot be called a deity. The guard looked at the impudent visitor in anger. Filled with anger, the man gripped his axe tightly and then swung hard at his enemy. But the experienced killer dodged and stabbed his opponent in the stomach. After that, the furious Guang went into battle against a huge number of enemies. Bai Guang was trained to kill people since childhood. He gave up everything in the world for his mission. He forgot about himself and his usual everyday life. He doesn't even have a family. The only thing he has left is his desire for revenge. Driven by the desire for revenge, the guy fought a huge number of temple guards. Exhausted from the fight, he stood in front of his boss's gun. He told the monk that he had promised to live an ordinary life, that after this last mission he would become an ordinary man. The monk replied that he hadn't lied, and now Bai was indeed living an ordinary life, because every person meets his or her death sooner or later. "These are the laws of life," said the smiling monk as he pointed his gun at his victim. Before Buddha fired, the guy cursed his boss with hatred and promised revenge. The guy thought he was dead, but he was distracted by strangers around him trying to wake him up. 3 surprised policemen stood around him. He was lying in a hospital room. The guy could not understand what happened. One of the policemen said that the doctors had warned them about the temporary memory loss of the policeman. The girl called him Kim Kyung-soo and asked him to get it together. The guy asked who they were talking about, and his new friend gave him a mirror and a police card. It turns out that after his death, he was reborn as one of the policemen of the Ilsan police station. Now the formerly legendary killer, Bai Guang, became an ordinary policeman, Kim Kyung-soo. The guy looked at his reflection in the mirror and couldn't believe his eyes that he was really a cop now. As it turned out, the person he became tried to take his own life. His colleagues did not understand how he came to such an act and explained that he survived because the rope broke. The girl said that he could hardly have changed anything by writing down the names of the assholes he dealt with. The guy still didn't understand what she was talking about. As it turned out, Kim had written down the names of his abusers in his suicide note. They were senior police officers. The senior police officers accused him of being the son of suicidal criminals, and then said that he had become an officer for nothing and should die as well. Raising his hand to the boy, one of them asked why he had written their names in his suicide note in the first place. But the boy stood calmly. Unexpectedly for the attacker, he easily caught the hand before the blow. The senior officer began to threaten him. He turned to a colleague and asked her if she could consider it an attempt to kill a higher-ranking person. To his surprise, the girl replied that she did not see anything. Surprised by the answer, the man said he would help her see everything with her own eyes. Then he took her by the hair. Kim distracted him by calling the rude man an asshole, and then told him not to make such a mess. The angry cop called him an idiot and began to threaten him. But after Kim squeezed his hand even harder, he screamed in pain. Hwang Kyo-min started shaking in pain and asked his colleague to let him go. But the guy realized that this would not be enough and hit his opponent in the neck with his hand. Seonmin fell to the ground in pain. Youngchin did not understand how this was possible. Exhausted by the situation, Kim stretched his leg out in front of his next opponent, who was sitting on the ground. Then, he kicked him right between the legs. The poor man screamed in pain, and all the police around him were shocked. Holding out her finger in front of her, the girl called the guy a murderer. All the participants of the past events were taken to the office of an angry senior superintendent, Choi Jin-ha. He accused Kim of attacking a colleague. The man asked the guy standing in front of him if he really thought that the officer would be fired for such a thing. Then he said that he would personally take care of the bully's dismissal, and told Kim to leave. The guy was sitting on a bench. His mother and child, who were nearby, watched the policeman with admiration, but he said in frustration that all cops are retarded. His friendly colleagues told him he was crazy, and he said it was self-defense. One of the concerned police officers reminded him that the senior's father was a deputy assistant commissioner. Frightened by the situation, his colleagues wished him good luck with the problem. Kim realized that such bad officers were the reason why the cops couldn't catch him in his past life when he was a murderer. The boy was disappointed and said that he would rather be reborn as a pig than as someone of higher rank, while the smiling girl asked her mother what the policeman was talking about. The boy, on the other hand, was grateful that he was not what he used to be. Kim recalled how the monk picked him up on the street and then turned him into a cold-blooded serial killer, who was later killed by Boss. When he arrived at his new home, he immediately found the rope with which he tried to end Kim's life. This guy was left alone by his parents. His organization ruthlessly abused him, and generally did not appreciate the work he did. In this respect, Bai Guang and Kim were quite similar. The guy wondered if he should start working now. Meanwhile, at the Gyeonggi Province West Police Department, Senior Superintendent General Hong Jun was calmly reviewing a case. It was an unapproved operation to eliminate killers from one of the local clans. The silence in his office was interrupted by the voice of a stranger behind the general. The hooded stranger asked the policeman how he was doing. Startled by the suddenness, the man turned to the stranger, but in an instant he was immobilized by a sharp object near his neck. The frightened general asked the name of the attacker. The man in the balaclava replied that his name was Bai Guang. After these words, there was silence in the office. The general said it was nonsense. The guy sitting across from him could not be a legendary killer. He could not believe our hero's words that he had died, and then woke up in a hospital in the body of a police officer. Bai Guang told the general that he had no choice but to believe this story. He suddenly offered to help eliminate the Hwaguksa killers. The police chief could not believe that the guy across from him knew about the case. The general asked the guy again what his name was, but he again said his name was Bai Guang. The general, holding a radio under the table, said that this was not the best place to discuss Hwaguksa. Suddenly, the vibration of the radio under the table confused the policeman. The killer started to get up from the table and addressed the general. He said that he was not asking him for a favor. He was giving orders to the police general himself, who even had no idea what was going on in his hallway. 3 years ago, he was just a first lieutenant, wounded in the shoulder, sitting on the ground in the rain. Opposite him, under an umbrella and with a bloody mask on his face, stood the killer Bi Guang. He asked if the police were really hunting Buddha and constantly trying to ruin his plans. The guy told the policeman that he was the first person to get so close to Buddha, and the clan boss asked the killer to pass on the message. The future general said that he was not interested in this offer, after which the killer stuck a needle to his neck. The wounded man began to beg for his life, removing the mask from his face. Guang said he had a proposition for him. He said he would let him live if the police officer killed the scumbag Buddha within 3 years, and this conversation would remain a secret. The lieutenant could not understand the killer's intentions and asked why he wanted to kill his boss. Putting on a mask, the guy said he hated monks, especially their unbelievable greed and rudeness. Recalling this conversation, the guy told the general that he had not fulfilled his promise. Looking over Hong Jun's shoulder, the guy said that his opponent had made good progress in his career in 3 years, but he had broken his promise and instead sucked up to his superiors. Taking a pen out of his pocket, the guy said that he had no choice but to kill him. The frightened general began to make excuses and said that he had not broken his promise on purpose. He just had no choice. He continued to justify himself and said that he had risen to such a high rank to have access to classified information about the Buddha case he needed. He gathered all the information he needed for further work, and then went to coordinate the operation. However, the senior police officer had some questions about the information he had gathered. He doubted that the head of the killer gang was an ordinary monk under the pseudonym Buddha. The general pointed to his dossier and tried to convince his colleagues, but he could only make them laugh. They said it was nonsense, and that the temple where the monk was kept was a cultural heritage of their city. Trying to convey his opinion to his colleagues, he said that these were the results of a detailed study. But he was suddenly stopped by a policeman with 4 stars and many awards, who told him that if he was not careful, he would incur the wrath of God. This response completely destroyed the discussion about the upcoming operation. Leaving the conference, the highest-ranking police officer in the room said that this was not the place to discuss religious leaders. That's how Guang learned that the investigation was actually terminated by his friend's boss. The general gave him a folder with all the information that his unit had been able to obtain through hard work. After looking at the results of the police work, the guy replied, "They were stopped because they collected all kinds of nonsense." However, some of that information turned out to be true. The guy told the general that he could live in safety for now, but then he warned him not to relax, because his life depended on the outcome of the upcoming operation. The boy offered his help in this endeavor, promising not to kill him if it was successful. The concerned general did not know what to say. After the night's events, a new day began for the Ilsen police. Everything was quiet. No one expected any problems, when suddenly someone loudly and unexpectedly opened the front door with a kick. The girl got up from her desk, not realizing who made the noise, and the calm Kim greeted her as if nothing had happened. His colleagues, expecting that Kim had been fired, asked him why he was here. Suddenly, the door of the senior officer opened. He saw Kim, the troubled boy, in the center of the noise and asked what the heck was going on. The guy calmly asked where the boss was, but the furious officer said, "I told you, asshole, not to show your face here again. Seniors are on sick leave." He started repeating the words again. Suddenly, his rudeness was interrupted by the appearance of the general coming out from behind Kim. The general watched in silence as the commotion turned into dead silence. The officer began to apologize and asked why he was there. In response, the man cheerfully put his hand on the shoulder of a smiling Kim and said that he was wondering how his good friend was doing at work. Everyone was very surprised by the general's response, and the senior officer asked what kind of relationship they had. The general put his hand on the guy's head and said that he was his savior. After that, he asked to take good care of him. Everyone was very surprised how yesterday's loser suddenly became the favorite of the police chief. When they went outside, they continued the conversation. The guy asked if life was easy for high-ranking officers. The general nervously smoked a cigarette and asked if he needed anything else. The officer was about to go back to his office, but the guy asked him to do one more mysterious favor for him. In the evening of that day, the monk was doing his routine chores, when suddenly a stranger disturbed him and took him away from his ritual. The stranger introduced himself as a poor visitor to the church, and said that he had a bitter grudge in his heart. The monk stared at the stranger in amazement. The guy wearing the mask of the dead killer Bi Guang said that he was a spirit of revenge. The monk wasted no time in picking up the sharp candles nearby and threw them in the stranger's direction. They flew straight at his head, but Kim managed to react in time and dodge the attack. The guy pulled the candles out of the wall and said that the monk shouldn't destroy the Buddha temple. The monk stood up and said that he knew the mask. He said he was not happy with the spirits of revenge, and then called his mercenaries into the hall. The monk said that in this case, he would help Ai Guang's soul to find peace. He assumed one of the Buddhist religious postures, after which 5 armed thugs rushed to attack. Kim easily dodged the first blow and stabbed the enemy in the stomach. After catching the enemy's knife, continued to fight the enemies with his weapon. He easily dealt with the second fighter, and then continued to look at the monk with hatred. The boss knew exactly what kind of revenge he was talking about. He ordered his men to stop. The beginning of this fight was recorded on Kim's camera, but the video stopped because the signal was blocked. Turning to the monk, the guy said that now there were more souls to pray for, and then invited him to start the long-awaited ritual. Otherwise, the dead soldiers would become the same spirits of revenge as Bai. The monk asked his men to step aside, then turned to the boy and said he did not know who sent him, but the mask was familiar to him. Stretching his hand forward, he called him his child and asked him to show his face. Kim refused and said he was just here to say hello, and then warned him that this was not his last visit, and that he would soon find out who he was. After these words, the monk attacked the guy. Kim realized that his body was too weak to challenge such an experienced fighter. The monk managed to grab the boy's mask, but a moment later the room was filled with tear gas. The fighters asked if their boss was hurt. The monk managed to take the mask off and, covering his face, silently stared after the stranger. Filled with anger, he grabbed the object with all his might and broke it into pieces. The next day, an important meeting was scheduled in an ordinary park. The general waited for the young man without emotion. Kim said that he looked 10 years older, and the angry man replied that it was because of the amount of work he had to do, such as cleaning up the ward from the traces of an old comrade's hooliganism and the problematic theft of a police tear gas grenade. Kim disrespectfully scratched his ear and told him that he would not have to do this if he had fulfilled his promise on time. The general began to explain that it was not as easy as it sounds, because such cases need to be documented in detail, unlike killing people for hire. The guy threateningly extended his hand and said that he killed only those who deserved it, and then said that the general knew that himself. The furious policeman turned to Bi Guang and said that no one in this world can kill a person with impunity, even if they deserve it. All offenders must be justly convicted by law. The boy asked if those bad guys were judged and put on trial by those laws. The general replied that even if they arrested 10 murderers, they would be presumed innocent until the police could prove otherwise. He tried to explain that they didn't have enough evidence against the monk, but Guang didn't want to hear it and asked him to stop talking about laws. The young man said that it would be a good idea to create his own unit. The general was puzzled by his words and said that it was impossible for a weak officer like Kim, but the boy replied that he was the strongest police officer in the force. Hong Jun explained that all police officers report to their superiors. he asked what rank he needed to get to finally create his own unit for the operation. The general replied that he needed at least one of the small Muganghwa. Without listening to the story any further, the guy replied that in that case, he was going to immediately start working to move up the ladder and get promoted. The general calmly called the guy an idiot and asked him not to do anything stupid, as he needed some time to take care of the matter himself. But the guy again did not listen to his partner and silently went to execute the plan. He returned to the police station, where he asked his friend how he could quickly raise his rank. The girl replied that he needed to pass a special exam, while the guy was asked to supervise the arrested girl. The colleague was surprised that the guy hadn't fully regained his memory, so Kim asked when the exam was scheduled. As it turned out, he needed a year of experience to be admitted to this exam. The guy decided to calm down the intrusive girl and hit her on the neck, after which he asked his colleague if he had any other options. After putting the offender to rest on the floor at the police station, he said that he wanted to get a Muganghwa sign. The surprised girl replied that he shouldn't even dream about it, as it would take at least 10 years. The guy said that he knew a general. The girl, recalling this moment, said that she didn't even care, in which case he would just have to pass the exam. The guy asked if there were really no other ways, but the girl mysteriously replied that there was actually one option. It's called a special promotion. In order to get a special promotion, he needs to perform well and catch more offenders than other police officers. Distracted by her superior's errands, she said that newcomers like them don't have enough experience for this, so they are dumped with all the small work. After that, she started talking about her exciting patrols. But Kim didn't listen to her again, and went into the city to look for thieves. The city was crowded with people with different behaviors, including hooligans. Looking at the crowded street, he realized that in his line of work, he didn't have to worry about exams. The real job of a police officer is to find offenders and send them to jail. So from now on, he would have to try to fulfill this goal, to earn a greatly needed career promotion. It is said that at least 1 in 3 Korean residents has committed an offense at least once in their life. Usually it's something minor. But in any case, the statistics are disappointing. Bai Guang doesn't worry about minor offenses at all. He needs to find the real scum to reward him with the rank he wants. These criminals have to do things that Guang hadn't paid attention to before. Hiding among the crowd, he found his target. A satisfied gleam appeared in his eye. The music in the nightclub suddenly stopped. People who were resting after a hard day didn't understand what had happened. It turned out that the DJ wanted to attract attention to ask the visitors to become more active. A girl in the front row said they didn't have enough champagne. A man cheerfully asked if that was really what they were missing, and then asked the girls to open their mouths. Taking out some papers with an unknown substance, the guy asked the visitors if they wanted to have a good time. The men were delighted to see a familiar object. Taking 2 bottles of champagne in his hands, the DJ began to splash it into the crowd. He shouted that everybody should have fun, because tomorrow might not be the day. But a stranger shouted back that he was talking nonsense. Suddenly, the fun stopped. It was Kim, and holding one of the banned goods, he told the DJ that tomorrow he would be in jail. The guy immediately noticed the paper he was selling to the visitors. However, he did not get confused and offered the stranger to choose a girl from the front row to have fun, but Kim said he was not interested. Looking at the DJ, he said that this product was drugs. The DJ started laughing and said it must be some kind of a bad joke. Then, filled with anger, he asked who the hell he was. Taking off his shirt, the guy confidently said he was a police officer. The crowd was surprised, and the DJ started to figure out which of the guards let him in. But a moment later, one of the guards caught the bottle thrown by the policeman. After stopping the offender's dialogue, the guy suggested that they continue this discussion in prison. The DJ could not contain his anger. Then he shouted to the crowd to run away and started running towards the exit. He warned everyone around him that a cop had broken in, and that they should run away with the illegal goods. A moment later, one of the guards failed in his task and fell unconscious next to his colleague. Kim continued to indiscriminately beat all the people he met, and then went after the DJ. One of the guards tried to open the door, but he couldn't get it open. It turned out that the back door had long been propped up with a chair, and all the guards around were lying on the floor. The policeman finally caught up with the criminals, and then said that he was not a fan of playing catch-up. The guards looked at the enemy with fear, and the DJ asked if the policeman was acting alone. Kim replied that he was alone, but that didn't change anything. The criminal told his friends that they shouldn't be afraid of one cop. He had previously thought it was a professional police raid. He told the guards to get to work, and then they took out red patches and put them on their necks. After a moment, they screamed like animals. Kim looked on in amazement. The confident thief told the cop that he was finished. But the former assassin Guang punched one of his attackers in the face without another word, knocking him out instantly. The guard lay on the floor, screaming in pain. Kim said that this was exactly the scream he wanted to hear. The DJ looked on in fright as his bodyguards played the role of punching bags for the crazed cop. The guy fell to the ground in a cold sweat. Then he turned to the policeman with the hope of somehow resolving the situation. But Kim was not satisfied with a peaceful solution to the current situation. The guy offered his help. He could get any product for the cop. But Kim didn't take it seriously. The DJ continued to talk about the entire range of his services, but the cop said that he wanted a promotion at work, and the surprised guy did not understand what he was talking about. Kim repeated the promotion and grabbed the criminal. The next day, this situation was reported in the news, with a presenter talking about the arrest of a group of criminals who were distributing drugs. This made people concerned that the drug problem was still there. The man praised Kim for the work he had done. Promoted to the rank of senior police officer, Kim Soo thanked him and said humbly that he was just doing his job. The chief's mood changed dramatically, and he began to angrily list all the mistakes the police officer had made during this high-profile investigation. But Kim had no time to talk. He took something strange out of his briefcase. It was a package wrapped in leaves. The guy said he found it in the club. Unhappy with such wildness, the general accused the officer of stealing the evidence from the crime scene. The guy said it was paulownia leaves, and that thing actually rings a bell, because it's an ingredient in drug patches. One of the bandits we didn't know was holding a red patch in his hands, and then stuck it on the body of a frightened and beaten man. This poor man was selling goods in the city of Ilsan, and the situation was the fault of his employee, a DJ. The girl offered her colleagues to put another red band-aid on the man. His eyes were filled with fear of such a dose of drugs. He began to beg Mrs. Phoenix to stop. After a moment, his body could not withstand the load. He fell unconscious in front of his boss. Security guards took his body out of the room. The girl was watching the latest news with concern. She does not want to be punished like the other perpetrators of this incident. Looking at the photo of the policeman who made so much noise, she decided that he was the reason for all the trouble and that this problem needed to be solved as soon as possible. The police know this woman as the leader of a gang of drug dealers. She is called November Paulownia Phoenix and nicknamed Shitnix. The killer spent the next morning being productive. He performed strenuous physical exercises, despite the fact that Kim's body is quite strong and enduring. It was still not enough to overcome enemies like Buddha and all the other strong members of his crew. The exhausted guy was resting on the ground. His body was still not ready for such a war. It needed more time. At the police station, 3 of Kim's colleagues asked the senior officer if he had some time to talk. The guy looked surprised, not understanding what they wanted from him. As it turned out, his colleagues were surprised by his success. They were also interested in a career advancement at work. They were waiting for the long-awaited advice with a sincere smile. The guy was surprised to ask why his more experienced colleagues were asking him this question. The girl said that it was because of Kim's connections with the general, but the guy next to her managed to shut her up and said that it was only about his success. They happily said they were ready to help in any situation and would try to do their best. The guy looked at the sycophant in confusion, and then asked why he needed their help at all. The girl began to convince him that they were good friends and always helped each other out, but the guy replied that he had amnesia and could not remember such events. The girl decided to remind him how they had stood together against bullying from senior officers. The smiling boy said that they were colleagues first and foremost. Bai Guang reacted with pleasant surprise. He recalled his encounter with one of the gang members, who had called Bi Guang a killer who chose his victims. The two opposite him were unhappy that he was considered the best. In their opinion, it was unfair. The girl in charge of drug sales said that Guang doesn't deserve this special treatment from Buddha. It made her very angry. She wished the boy would die. Against this background, the behavior of the new colleagues looked unusual. Pointing his finger at them, he angrily said that they could not be colleagues and friends with such a difference in position, so they should work harder. The girl was furious with his words and tried to break up the fight. The guy asked if he could consider it a threat to a senior employee. Suddenly, their noise was stopped by a man's voice. The boss came up to them to find out why they were not working. Everyone immediately began to explain their results and said they were just taking a short break. The boss said he didn't have the words to describe how stupid they were. But as he got closer, he noted that there were exceptions among them. His new favorite, General Kim's comrade. The boss asked how he was doing, and the guy replied that he had a sore shoulder, which the smiling man put his hand on. The old man continued to compliment him and asked him not to overwork. His behavior was related to the fact that he would get a promotion because of Kim's success. We seem to have forgotten about the other wonderful officers, who were still filled with hatred. An officer in civilian clothes was holding his pants. He was still in pain after that fight. The guy could not get over the fact that Kim got a special promotion and has a friend who is a general. After that, everyone only talks about Kim. Huang Yongshen did not believe in the newcomer's success and wanted to see for himself. Suddenly, a girl with a bag of sweets approached the officers. She wanted to know the way to the police station. At first, they didn't want to answer, but when they saw the girl, a blush appeared on their cheeks. The pretty girl replied that her phone was dead. Fascinated by her beauty, the boys began to apologize for their rudeness, and then decided to help her. They gladly told her that they worked for the Ilsan Police Department. The girl later asked if they knew a police officer named Kim Guionzu. The boys awkwardly replied that they knew this newcomer. The girl thoughtfully replied that he had to return one important thing to her. To make the policemen more interested, she offered them her baked goods, which were cookies in the shape of a chrysanthemum. The general was looking at the report he had received from Guang, which indicated that the gang member was responsible for the accounting, as well as killing the victims with drugs of varying degrees of concentration. These drugs are codenamed Buddha's tears. In addition, the former killer said that the girl was afraid of being punished by her boss. In this criminal organization, she is the most insane person in this criminal organization. Everyone was surprised that she was in the police station. The blonde girl pointed her finger at the officer she was interested in. Kim's colleague asked the girl what she was looking for, and the stranger said she needed flowers. The officer did not understand what she was talking about. The girl explained that she was looking for flowers wrapped in the leaves of a plant. The police officers started to see if they had anything like that, but the girl stopped them and pointed her finger at Kim, saying that she thought he knew where to look for the missing thing. No one understood what his connection to this strange woman was. The guy tried to call the general, but the cell phone service was jammed. In addition, cameras also stopped working. The guy has known her for a long time. They trained together as kids, as members of the same gang. The guy has always stood out from the rest with his extraordinary skills. The girl had no chance. Buddha always watched them train. The monk asked if there were any talented fighters among the participants. And looking at his opponents lying down, the guy calmly replied that they were no match for him. After this answer, the boss called the guards, and then gave the order to kill all the weaklings. Bai Guang was against this and suggested giving them time to train. But the boss replied that sympathy for others was not a good feeling for him. The boy realized that he could not change anything. But the silence was broken by a sudden appeal to the boss. The last girl Guang fought with was able to stand up holding a wooden sword, and she promised to train hard to be useful to Buddha. The man asked her if she was serious, and then said that it would be faster if she died now and came back to him in the next life after reincarnation. The girl kept begging to be saved. The guards tried to give her a critical dose of drugs, but only managed to do so with brute force. The next morning, the gang of criminals gathered again at the training ground, and the monk gave the order to remove the bodies from the previous night. But one of the guards saw the girl conscious. He said she was still breathing. The monk could not believe his eyes. Such a huge dose of drugs could not overcome her. The boss decided to get serious and asked her to eat all the pills on the table in just 1 month. He said that this way she could prove her worth, and the girl gladly agreed. As it turned out, the girl became immune to drugs and poisons. She became a member of the gang and was named Phoenix. Putting on her mask, she swore loyalty to her boss and said she would always be useful. That's how she became a monster with an extreme addiction to drugs. She approached Kim and asked where her lost things were. But the guy couldn't continue the conversation in front of his colleagues, so he said that her things were at his house. The guy asked her to go home with him, after which he started to climb over the table, which angered the other police officers. Dissatisfied with this answer, the girl said that it was a primitive lie, and then said that a police officer would not keep drugs in his home. After these words, the policeman realized what she was talking about and just stood in a stupor. The angry girl said that it was too cheap a trick for her, and then reached into the light bag and pulled out a couple of band-aids that were familiar to the boy. A moment later, she threw them in his face, but he managed to dodge the attack. But this did not save his colleagues. They immediately felt sick. They did not understand what was happening to them. The policeman lost consciousness. Meanwhile, the officer was approached by other strangers who had entered the department. They had already dealt with the guy's other colleagues. The girl said he was unlikely to let them die, so it was time to make the right decision. The girl said that everything could be easily fixed by simply returning her drugs. But the guy didn't listen and jumped into the fight, and she was able to react to his first punch. But Kim managed to tear her favorite blouse. The girl realized why he did it. He was holding a device that jammed cell phones around him. The guy destroyed it, but the girl was more angry about what happened to her blouse. The guy showed his call to the general and said that other cops would arrive soon. But until they arrived, he could safely eliminate his enemy. With an arrogant smile, the girl said that was impossible. But the guy replied that she would soon regret her impudence. Bai Guang was already looking forward to the fight, and she started laughing at the confident policeman's words. She said that his behavior was not worthy of a police officer, and that he had torn her favorite blouse. Phoenix called Kim a pervert, and almost got attacked in response. But the guy just distracted her to throw a knee, which she clearly wasn't expecting. But she managed to stay on her feet. Phoenix started holding her head. Then she called the cop an idiot. One of the gang leaders was very angry about the missed shot, and the guy said that now she looks ugly. The angry girl finally calmed down, and then said that Kim surprised her, and now she thinks he's not just a policeman. The guy replied that she was trying to be calm and vain. The girl looked at him furiously, and asked if he was a special agent. Kim said that she should find out for herself. The girl took out red patches and said that she didn't really care who he was before. The former killer called what he saw next disgusting. The girl put a band-aid on her neck and her appearance changed. Ready to fight, she told the cop that he would soon have to look for a new job in hell. The girl rushed to attack. The guy mockingly replied that one patch would not be enough and hit her on the head with a police baton. The girl fell to the ground. Kim asked where her confidence had gone and advised her to use 10 more patches, and then continued to strike her. The girl was able to fight back. She was filled with hatred for her opponent. The guy said in a calm tone that she had not changed at all, and that she still hopes to be able to do without training, strengthening her body only with drugs. He believes that in this situation, it gives him a significant advantage. Phoenix freaked out and screamed at him not to pretend they knew each other. Kim pushed her down to her feet and threw a punch, after which the girl fell on her back. The guy asked her to remember who else had beaten her to death in this way. The girl shouted that this was complete nonsense, but the guy calmly replied that a huge amount of drugs had destroyed her brain. Putting the baton to Phoenix's neck, the guy asked her if she would have time to guess who he was before she died, and then wished her death. Suddenly, his baton broke under the pressure, and her face was close to his. The girl managed to land her first blow and then knelt down. The guy was surprised at the poor quality of the police batons that were issued to low-ranking officers. Phoenix suddenly got up and attacked, and the guy managed to defend himself with his hands, and then noticed an unknown band-aid. The furious girl stuck it on her forehead. Kim assumed it was her new weapon, then looked at his hands and realized he had made a mistake. He was getting sicker and sicker, and he guessed it was because of the contact with the girl's clothes. It was an endurance fight. Not understanding how this cop could fight with her on equal terms, she said that it was a familiar feeling for her, but then she was distracted from the conversation by one of the gangsters who informed her that other police officers were already nearby. Kim calmly waved his hand and said that this time he was letting her go. Then he said that this was not their last meeting. He knew for sure that the cops would not even try to pursue her because it was too dangerous. The girl tore off the band-aid from her forehead and went out with the other bandits. She was very worried, and the other gang members were cautiously trying to find out what had happened. She thought that the policeman reminded her of Bi Guang. The drug dealers left the department shortly before police backup and ambulances arrived. Doctors began to work with the victims of the unknown substance, while police inspected the department after the enemy raid. The general was disappointed that Kim had missed the enemy, and for saying so, he was told the reason for the boy's failure: a bad police baton. Kim said that the only reason the enemies escaped was the poor quality of the police equipment. Holding his nose, the man replied that it was a good weapon, and the boy just did not know how to use it properly. Everyone around was surprised that the guy was treating a senior general like that. Kim began to complain that after such a fight he could not feel his arm. The concerned general quickly called a doctor to help his comrade. As the doctor examined the unfamiliar marks on the guy's arms, Kim thought he was lucky that Phoenix had run away in fright, as this new drug had unforeseen and effective effects that he could not handle. He did not expect his former colleague to cause him so much trouble. Kim again asked the general to do him a favor, which we will soon learn about. Meanwhile, evening came. The guy returned to his home. He opened the door to his apartment, and the thugs who had recently attacked the police department were waiting for him. And they threw a gas grenade, and then jumped to the ground, believing that their victim was trapped and would die from the hallucinogenic gas. Miss Phoenix recommended that they maximize the dosage of the substance. As it turned out, the guy asked the general for the best equipment they had. Holding an assault rifle, the guy in the professional special forces outfit said he was ready for the strangers to come. Guang laughed at the fact that the gang showed up without their leader, Phoenix. But it didn't bother him too much because it was time to test the police's really serious weapons. After he aimed at the enemies, the bandits panicked a bit. One of them said it was unlikely that the weapon was loaded, but a moment later he was shot in the forehead. And then chaos ensued with all the objects around him being hit by his bullets. The hired killers could not even move. After a whole magazine of rubber bullets, the guys fell exhausted to the floor. Observing the result of his work, the guy recognized this weapon as quite good. Later, the police arrived at the house, and the residents tried to find out what had happened, because the noise in Kim's apartment was disturbing. At first, the general silently watched the two beaten men, and then asked why the guy had used so many bullets on them. Kim warned his friend that the killers might regain consciousness on the way to the hospital, so he should check if they had any drugs under their tongues. After these details, the man began to believe more that the guy opposite him was really Bai Guang. His level of professionalism was not that of an ordinary officer. The general said it was hard to believe. But after the Phoenix drug situation and everything that happened in the apartment, he started to lose his doubts. Because only Bai Guang could do that kind of thing. But there was only one question that bothered him: how he still didn't get his revenge on his boss, Buddha. Kim answered that a police officer would need to have enough evidence to do such a job. The man said that this would be logical for a police officer, but not for a famous killer. The guy said that his boss is a man respected by the whole country, and people actually perceive him as the reincarnation of Buddha himself. His unexpected death will alert people, and a simple murder will not solve a global problem. Without him, the clan and other criminal organizations would continue to exist. In fact, the filled with hatred Bai Guang wished for the downfall of this asshole monk in every possible way imaginable, to make sure no one would be forced to live life like he did. Fully understanding the guy's intentions, the general replied that he will do everything in his power to help him in this matter. Extending his hand to the guy in the Special Forces equipment, he offered to work together to achieve a mutual goal. Guang was surprised by this behavior, but he did not lose his cool and shook his friend's hand strongly, saying that he was not actually helping the general, but saving him from his intention to kill him. He then asked the man to stick to his plans. He also said that it was not that he was not trying to take revenge, but that he was not really capable of doing so. Bai Guang had become such a serious threat to society because of his boss. Buddha easily lifted Phoenix into the air, and the girl desperately tried to apologize. But the angry boss wouldn't hear it and slammed her to the floor. He said she was a crazy drug addict for breaking into the police department to look for her lost drugs. With tears in her eyes, she continued to apologize. But Buddha said that she appeared to be in need of a lesson. The girl, with panic, began to crawl on, begging for mercy without stopping. This process was interrupted by sudden laughter in the room. A man's voice called the girl a crying baby. Another man said that she had hit a new law. These were some of the strongest hired killers. They advised the girl to stop crying because stress reduces the strength of her muscles. The girl recognized the Lespedeza brothers she knew, and then asked her boss what these idiots were doing here. The masked girl replied that Buddha had actually invited them to the temple himself. Her name is Cherry Blossom, and she also appeared quite unexpectedly. The boss said that finally everyone he was waiting for had arrived. The girl stared at him with a frightened look. Buddha announced the start of the elimination of Phoenix. The girl tried to convince her boss that she would return their goods, but the man said he didn't need her help and had already done it himself. The girl could not believe her eyes that he had done it so easily. Buddha asked what the decision of the three killers would be. The Lespedeza brothers unanimously decided that the girl was disgusting because she neglected muscle strength and used drugs, so they thought she should be punished. The girl apologized to Phoenix and said that she had to be the best of killers to survive in this cold and cruel world. All the opinions of the panelists were taken into account, and the girl bowed her head in front of the boss and started shaking in fear. With tears in her eyes, she said that Buddha was too cruel, and that her elimination was his original plan. So he called people who hated her to discuss it. The situation was hopeless. Cherry Blossom respectfully handed the gun to her boss. Aiming the gun at Phoenix, Buddha said that he did not need useless drug addicts, then turned to God and prayed for his salvation. Bowing to the ground in front of the boss, the girl suddenly announced that she had invented a new drug with 5 times the effect of the previous one. She had developed it herself and was convinced that they would not be tested. The brothers were disappointed that it was back to drugs. The boss put the gun away and asked how much of the new product she had, and the girl said she had 10 kilograms. When asked about the delivery of the stuff, Phoenix replied that she already had reliable routes and would be able to distribute drugs in many large Asian countries. The girl tearfully convinced her boss that she would live up to his expectations and that she needed 6 months to do so. Buddha replied that he had already lost too much because of her mistakes, and therefore gave her only 3 months to prove her worth. And the girl's face was filled with joy. Meanwhile, the police officer still couldn't come to her senses. She was still under the influence of the drug used by the bandits during the raid on the department. She slurred her words and asked her colleagues to wipe away her saliva. All the injured officers were surprised that Kim visited his colleagues. The guy was just making excuses. The guy just wanted to thank them for visiting him in the hospital. The girl slurred her words and said he was a rude bastard. The guy said that he would probably get a special promotion again. Kim said goodbye and told them that instead of envy, they should pull themselves together and start working. In their opinion, Kim changed a lot after the suicide attempt. The girl could not respond and was just sitting with a handkerchief in her mouth. They sighed heavily, not knowing what to do next. Meanwhile, a serious discussion was taking place at police headquarters. The general suspected that there was a snitch in the department. The man wanted to check the drugs he had seized and sent them for examination. But someone managed to steal them. The guy had no idea who did it, so he just accepted the fact that they had lost the only evidence against the criminal group. Kim said that they should deal with the internal problems of the police themselves and get new information from the arrested drug trafficking gang members. He also asked when a special unit to investigate the clan's crimes would be involved in the case. But the general replied that all the members of that unit were already dead. The guy looked at his friend in disbelief, and then, filled with anger, told him that it was a lie. The general tried to justify himself by saying that he did not trust Bai Guang at the time. But this answer did not satisfy the angry boy. Kim decided not to hit him and simply put his fist to the man's face, and the general suggested that he create a new anti-drug department. He argued that he had the right rank to perform this task. But the man refused and said he liked to work alone. Holding his boss by the tie, Kim said that due to recent events he had changed his attitude to teamwork. The general then turned to the police officer Kim Kyung-soo. He said that the police is a complex organization in which it is impossible to work all the time without support. Even for such an experienced fighter as Bi Guang, with a team it will be easier for him to generate reports and get more funding. He ordered his ward to form a special team with a serious face, and then told him that he could not form his own because of the risks and excessive surveillance. The guy was not satisfied that the general called it an order and threateningly said that he would proceed with the plan only if he asked nicely. The general had no choice but to reformulate his request in a polite way. After this conversation, the guy went to his colleagues at the hospital. They received his offer. The police could not understand how a corporal could create his own unit. The guy replied that it was the general's request. The girl said something incomprehensible with a surprised look, and her friend explained that it was a question about the composition of the team. Keeping his hands in his pocket, the guy calmly replied that they should become his colleagues in this case, and then clarified that there was no one in the department who would be better suited. His colleague attacked the guy with gratitude and said that he believed that he was not a scumbag. The overjoyed police officers could not hold back their tears. They pledged their loyalty and hard work to Kim. But after they called their senior officer friend a colleague, Kim clarified the matter. He said he needed obedient people to do his bidding. With a menacing look on his face, Kim said that from now on, they were his slaves, and their lives would be completely under his control. The cocky guy asked to be addressed as their master. According to the report of Senior Superintendent General Hong Jun, the guy with the dark hair is named Hwang Hee-jun. He looks like a good candidate because he does boxing, kickboxing, and other martial arts. But he had difficulty with the written exam and barely managed to get a job in the police force. The real problem was that he was basically a dumbass. The balding guy next to him was also interesting. He's 25 years old and his name is Lee Seong-yoon. He's a skilled hand-to-hand fighter in jiu-jitsu and judo. He has a good past, but he had an incident on the day of the interview. Offended by the disrespect, the guy turned out to be a crybaby. The girl decided to calm her colleague down, and surprisingly, at that moment, she regained the ability to speak normally. She is also 25 years old and her name is Jo Gyung-hee. She is also 25 years old and her name is Jo Gyung-hee, and she is not physically fit and has no experience in martial arts. She is considered the weakest police officer in the department, but it's not all bad. She was the first to finish the written test at the entrance exam and got the highest score, and her interview was the best of all. So we can assume that she is very smart. The next day began in the mountains near the city. The team of the new special unit stood in confusion in their tracksuits. Meanwhile, Kim had already started his warm-up. They immediately had questions for their boss. They didn't know why they were gathered on a day off, and the guy responded by asking his colleagues to start warming up. Pointing at them, Kim said they were police officers, while he himself was a dangerous killer, so they had 5 minutes to warm up before the fight. The guys didn't understand where he got his confidence from and offered more fair terms while Joe tried to shut them up. Sentimental Lee was worried that their boss might get hurt, but the serious guy replied that it was already 4 minutes into their warm-up time. While Kim was warming up for the fight, the trio began to discuss something quietly. Yeonji thought that their colleague was crazy and that she couldn't treat him the way he wanted. But the guy overheard and the team had to apologize. Hwang, like the others, didn't take the boss's offer seriously and asked if there were any options to fulfill this order. The girl suggested that he pretend to attack while Lee threw him to the ground. The guy with the great hand-to-hand skills replied that he was afraid to do that. Hwang Hee-jun thought that he would just have to run in the direction of the enemy, but the girl said that he should also use his martial arts knowledge. While the trio were discussing their plan, Kim was ready to fight. The team was surprised to see his excellent physical shape. The guy said that the time for preparation was over and it was time to start. The team started to act. The first guy's task was to deceive the enemy. He was reducing the distance and kept thinking about how to do it. And then decided that Kim's attention would be attracted by him crouching in place in a funny boxing stance. Two of his colleagues were confused by the way the task was handled and asked him to come closer to the boss. But they realized that their plan had completely failed. Kim didn't play games with them and struck a quick blow to the enemy. The guy realized that his order was not taken seriously and asked them to stop playing games and start a real fight. The frightened Lee must go ahead and execute the plan next. But he did the wise thing and started running away screaming that he couldn't do it. This turned out to be a big mistake because it is unacceptable to show your back to your opponent. Kim quickly caught up with him and punched him in the face. The girl was frightened as her last hope was shattered. The guy looked in Joe's direction. The girl was scared and hoped that the fight was over. She asked her boss if he would really beat a defenseless girl. The guy looked into the girl's eyes and asked if she was a police officer, and then delivered a telling knee to her face. The girl started complaining that she was bleeding. The boss was not happy with the outcome of the fight and asked how his team was going to catch the criminals with such poor physical fitness. Kim said that they had 10 minutes to rest, after which they would have 3 more chances to show their best. They had no choice, so they just agreed to his words. After the training, the former killer visited the police headquarters. While enjoying a snack, the general asked his colleague how his unit was doing. The guy said that he was very unhappy with them and did not understand how they managed to become police officers in the first place. He believes that such fighters are not ready to fight against such a serious threat as the Buddha clan. Bai Guang asked when the results of the interrogation of the arrested gang members would be available, but the general said that they had not said a word. Unfortunately, getting information from drug dealers is not an easy task. Kim regretted that he hadn't dealt with them himself when he met them at the apartment. So he said he would find out everything he needed to know from them himself. When he found out that torture is prohibited, he didn't get discouraged. He already had a great idea to help solve the problem. The 2 arrested gang members were sitting waiting for the officer. Kim walked into the room. The guys immediately said that they would not say anything and that there was no point in interrogation. But unexpectedly, the police officer asked how the right-hand man of Phoenix Choi Sang-mook, the one who is enormous and dressed in blue flower-patterned clothes, was doing, and then clarified that he is actually the left hand, while the right hand is Kim Dong-keol. He continued to tell secret information about the gang, and the surprised arrested guys asked who he was. The guy replied that he was Bi Guang and offered to have a serious conversation. One of them was very surprised. The other guy called his friend an idiot, explaining that Bai Guang was dead. The guy replied that the policeman really looked like the legendary killer from their clan. Kim replied that he remembered him, and they actually knew each other. He recognized the scars on the scared boy, and then said that those are from stepping on high heels. Looks like he was beaten by Phoenix because he got caught smuggling drugs. The guy was shocked by this information and said that Bi Guang was really alive, and Kim replied that the boss had given him a top-secret mission to fake his own death and infiltrate the police system to track the actions of the high-ranking officers. He is well aware of Miss Phoenix's unsuccessful raid on the police department to recover the lost valuable goods. He needs to know where their boss Phoenix is now. The police officer said that he had jammed the communication in the room, and so they can safely give the information that will save their colleague. He said that after such chaos, she must do something to fix the situation. Otherwise, he would have to eliminate her. The guys were very worried about her and asked Bai Guang not to doubt her abilities, because she had just started developing new drugs. The guy said that he did not really believe in their words, and suggested discussing the topic in more detail. The general was surprised that the officer's report mentioned a new drug 5 times stronger than the previous ones. He was able to find out that this product will be distributed in 6 months in specific places with the help of drug trafficking gangs. Kim was unable to find out where Phoenix lives, as this information is only available to her inner circle. He's going to break into the headquarters and get the information out of these people, but he thinks it will be quite a difficult task. The sales manager Choi told his boss that 3 months is not enough time to do such a job. Rushing things is unlikely to improve the result. Production manager Kim Dong-kil said that 2 of their colleagues were arrested. So the Buddha task has become difficult to accomplish without significant risk. The angry girl asked if her assistants would be able to take responsibility for the consequences of missing the deadline, and a voice behind the boys replied that they were ready for it. Sang-pi agreed to take responsibility. The girl said that Phoenix was guided by fear and therefore could not make decisions adequately. She asked what could have happened to make her make such a difficult choice. With a serious tone and a threatening look, Phoenix replied that her orders were not subject to discussion, and then asked Choi to change the dates of the work and start looking for sales outlets, while Dongshol should prepare everything necessary to fulfill the plan. The boss had other plans for the girl. San-pi stayed in the room to support the girl in her time of need. She told her frightened colleague that she shouldn't worry and that she could always count on the support of her loved ones. They would be able to solve all the problems. Meanwhile, the 3 members of the special unit continued their grueling training with their boss and begged him to give them more time to rest. Kim replied that 10 minutes was enough, and they should continue fighting. The girl said it was too much, and they didn't have to train at all. And the boy reminded them that they had agreed to do their best for the team. The trio believed that their task was to catch criminals, not to fight their boss. The guy was surprised by the seriousness of their intentions, so he asked the team to follow him. They came to an unfamiliar warehouse, and what they saw inside brought fear to their faces. There were men with large amounts of drugs. Kim told them that this was exactly what they wanted. The leader of the bandits asked what the strangers were doing in their warehouse. The frightened members of the unit looked at their boss, and he told them that the criminals were not in front of them, so it was time to arrest them as planned. The gang leader already realized that they were police officers. Meanwhile, the cheerful guy sent the team to carry out the task. The white-haired gangster ordered his men to get rid of the uninvited guests. Kim walked out of the warehouse expecting a funny show, and wished his frightened colleagues a good time. The criminals approached their opponents. Lee, as always, began to panic. His friend had never fought against several people at once, so he was also worried about the upcoming battle. Folding her arms in front of her, the determined girl told her colleagues that they should calm down. She believed that they would not die here and that their boss knew what he was doing. She suggested that the team should show the boss that they were worthy police officers. Kim knew that Jo Gyung-hee was the smartest one in the team and would be able to stay calm in such a situation. But she still made a mistake and just told the guys to go into battle without a plan. The guy didn't know what to do, but the girl said he should be the first to strike. Huang ran at his opponent under the motivating shout of his colleague, but he couldn't overcome his fear and closed his eyes in front of his opponent and missed the punch in the face. The team did not understand what he was doing. At first, the guy said it hurt, but then he said he actually expected the worst. Huang told the team that compared to Kim's punches, this fight was just a trifle, and then he punched the criminal in the stomach. The guys realized that after training with the boss, these criminals were no more scary to them than children in a fight, but they underestimated the cunning of the enemy who decided to fight by any means necessary. Huang turned to face the man with the metal pipe. But just before the blow, Lee saved his colleague and engaged the enemy in hand-to-hand combat. Kim appreciated the efforts of his trainees and thought that they could be useful after training. Meanwhile, the girl continued to support her colleagues. Standing up from the table, the bandit leader called his men stupid idiots. Taking off his shirt, he said that they were weak and could not cope with 2 policemen, which he found funny. The formidable enemy had put fear into Lee and Huang. Kim realized that the scared boys would not be able to deal with their enemy. Their fear of him made them weak. Lee was the first to receive a powerful blow to the face, and his friend Huang still couldn't realize how it happened. Panic only makes their pain worse, so the boys still had a lot to learn. The gangster boss didn't understand how his men couldn't handle such weaklings. The girl immediately started apologizing and said she was giving up. She offered information in exchange for her safety. Kim was disappointed by her actions, but Jo Gainchi was just carrying out her cunning plan. As soon as the gangster boss approached, she pulled out her police taser, and she gave her enemy a painful stab. The unbearable pain of the sneak attack angered the bandit boss. He removed his foot and swung to punish the girl for her actions. The girl resigned herself to the fact that she had failed. But a moment later, Kim saved her by kicking the criminal in the stomach. The man was shocked by the force of the blow. He could not cope with the speed of the legendary killer. After the fight, Kim asked the team if they still thought they were ready to catch criminals. After such a failed attempt, they realized they were useless. The guy said that they needed to seize the drugs they found for further investigation. The bandits would be useless, so they could just leave them in the warehouse. For Kim, this is just more trouble on top of the clumsy team. The consequences of this event began immediately. The boss of the small drug gang was already apologizing on his knees to the distribution manager, Choi Sang-muk. He tried to explain that the cops were to blame, but Choi didn't want to hear any excuses. One of the gang members distracted the manager with a strange object, and the man looked at it with great surprise. It was a map he had known for a long time. It belonged to the legendary killer of his clan. Sang-muk realized that it was from Bai Guang. The whole box of drugs was already in the general's office. Hong Jun was pleased with his friend's work and said that their expectations had been met, so they should continue with the original plan. They planned to organize an ambush for the enemies, and one of the chief's most trusted colleagues would participate, whom he called into his office on the radio. The general asked the officer to greet his new colleague. "She is a member of KNPSO, U Superintendent Kim Ah-hyang." Hong Jun introduced her to Senior Police Officer Kim Gyong-soo and invited her to sit on the sofa. However, the girl was surprised that an ordinary officer would allow himself to sit so brazenly in the general's office, and asked the guy if he was crazy. Gyong-soo took the girl's hand away from his face and said that his legs just hurt. The woman was unhappy with his insolence and put her foot on his knee, and then threateningly told him to get up, but the boy replied that she should make him. He did not want to get up. The general just watched. The boy offered the girl to make him get up herself, and in his opinion, the difference in their ranks was insignificant. This angered the girl even more, and she warned her that things were serious now. The tension between them grew. Hong Jun asked his colleague not to start a fight, but it was too late. The girl swung her leg at her opponent, and then suddenly changed her stance. The guy barely managed to dodge the sudden Brazilian kick. But he had no further problems. Kim realized that he was on a completely different level from his colleagues in the unit. The girl was furious. She didn't understand how the guy could dodge every punch she threw. The angry girl agreed to the rules of his game and decided to grab the guy by force. She was much faster than Lee. This girl might be useful to his plan. But in any case, she was no match for him. The boy threw the first punch and ended the conflict. The lieutenant didn't understand how she ended up on the lap of the guy she hates. Kim asked her why she was intending to pick up the guy and ended up lying down on the couch herself. The realization of the situation and the response of the opponent again filled the girl with anger, and she continued the fight. The guy, dodging every attack, praised her for her excellent physical shape, which only made the senior police officer more angry. The general just watched calmly and enjoyed his chocolate bar. Finally, the chaos stopped and it was time to get to work. The general began to describe an operation called Phoenix on top of a Polonia tree, according to their information. On the last weekend of every month, the drug sales managers get together at headquarters, with the next meeting in about 15 days. The general suggested that K&P Su's team and Officer Kim Kyung-soo's unit execute the plan by working together. But she refused because she did not trust the source of the information in the report. The general replied that the officer had managed to get the information from the arrested, and the girl was furious that all her attempts had been unsuccessful. The guy asked her to show some gratitude for the information, but she was still offended by the situation. She was annoyed by the officer's manner of communication, but she could not do anything about it. So she offered to repeat the interrogation herself to confirm the dubious information. Unfortunately, it was no longer possible, as the arrested prisoners were already dead by that time. The girl was shocked by the answer, and the guy asked why they had such terrible security. The general said that it didn't matter, and they should prepare for the next conference. The girl asked under what conditions the arrested bandits died. The general asked Kim Kyung-soo to stay for a few more minutes. The officer's unexplainable importance could not leave the policewoman alone. She warned him that she was a skilled firearms officer and had already aimed at his head, and then loudly slammed the door. The general said that the witnesses had died in the interrogation room, where they had found an unknown object. He asked if the boy had any idea what it was. Kim was surprised to see a map of the killer with a picture of a crane. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of drug traffickers, Phoenix anxiously held the map of the legendary killer. Managers could not understand how the item had gotten into one of their warehouses, but she believed that her Oppa Bai Guang was dead, and she couldn't tell her boss such nonsense. Phoenix panicked that it was impossible, and suggested that we continue to stick to the original plan of action. She didn't understand what was going on and how the police didn't notice his card. She needed to do everything she could to avoid being punished. These thoughts drove the girl crazy. She started screaming in a panic, and the managers immediately called Sang-P for help. The girl came to calm down her unbalanced colleague, and after collecting her thoughts, Phoenix turned to her managers, and then gave the order to stick to the plan. The men believed that the cops already knew their plans, and now it was too dangerous, and they had new problems that needed time. The girl asked her colleague, Sang-P, to help the men. She agreed and gave the managers some unknown substances. All their doubts about possible failure instantly disappeared. They were ready to continue their business. Kim Kyung-soo continued to train the team, but only one girl joined him, and the boys decided to visit the hospital. The team captain called them weaklings, and the girl thought it was a great opportunity to relax. But Kim had a different opinion. He suggested a one-on-one match, calling it a special secret training session. The girl did not know what would happen next. Kim explained that she was in terrible physical shape, but the girl was disturbed by these words and shyly replied that she had a normal build. The guy thought she had terrible endurance and weak muscles. He had no reason to praise her. He explained his concern that being so weak, she might die on her next mission. Despite her weakness, Jo Kyung-hee managed to get a job in the police force. She was smarter than expected. This girl was able to memorize the numbers of all the restaurants in the area, for which she is very respected. Now the losers can't easily order food without her help. Pulling out a stick, the guy suggested that the girl should pay attention to her strengths instead of hiding her weaknesses. He said that in their training, the folded baton would be a knife, and the unfolded baton would be a blunt weapon. The first fight will be easier so that the girl can get used to her body. Kim asked to learn as much as possible from this training. The girl was scared by his words, but the guy said she would soon understand. Meanwhile, the guys returned to the team. They were surprised by what they saw. Their captain was sitting on an exhausted Jo Kyung-hee lying on the ground. With tears in her eyes, she said that it was too hard of a training session. The guys asked what happened, but Kim's threatening look instantly made them forget what happened. With a smile on his face, the boss said that they would soon understand everything too. Huang and Li wanted to avoid this torture, but in reality they had no choice. The training continued. It had been a long time since the last training session. Finally, the day of Operation Phoenix on top of a Paulownia tree came. The team had survived 15 days of hell and didn't want to remember these events. They were wondering how serious their mission should be, that even KNP Sue would be involved. The captains of the two teams were standing in front of the forest, and the girl doubted that they could find anything there. The team suddenly stopped. They found something interesting. To their surprise, it was a tunnel guarded by two criminals. While the special unit was trying to figure out who these weirdos with rooster heads were, the KNP commander was already in the fight, and the bandit barely had time to notice her swift attack. However, he could not dodge her blow. The second fighter drew his knife. However, it was too late and he was instantly hit by the girl's high kick. The newly formed team was shocked by her strength. Even after their ruthless training, she was on a completely different level. 2 targets were eliminated and the girl announced the start of the operation. Kim told Joe that the KNP captain's impeccable physical form was exactly what he was referring to. The girl suddenly stopped her colleagues. She ordered them to stay back to watch for enemies lying down. Everyone was surprised, and the captain of the new unit decided to clarify that despite his good physical shape, his colleague had mental problems. Superintendent Kim Ha-young thought that the idea of combining the efforts of the KNP Sue and a unit of regular officers was a mansion, which offended Joe, and her disagreement made Ha-young very angry. To her chagrin, she was forced to bring them along because of the general's order, but asked them not to interfere with the operation. Kim suggested that his colleague work separately, which would make his task easier. And the girl was happy. KNP Sue went into the tunnel first. Officer Kim Kyung-soo was probably the only one who fully understood their situation. This tunnel was unusual. After they passed through this passage, they would find something they didn't expect. They found themselves in a nightclub crowded with drug addicts, with loud music. The patrons looked like zombies. Confused, Ah-young could not understand where she was. Meanwhile, their intrusion was noticed. One of the managers of Phoenix was expecting this. He had sensed this would happen from the beginning, so he picked up the radio and addressed the patrons of the club. He said that they had uninvited guests, and for every stranger they caught, they would get a special gift. It was unlimited access to drugs for a whole month. So suddenly, the KNP launched the long-awaited operation. A crowd of people desperately tried to overcome the police shields, and the girl could not understand how these zombies had such extraordinary strength. Dong-hil knew that in this situation the police would not be able to use firearms. The captain ordered the team to wear masks. She decided to use a gas grenade, and the tear gas flew towards the maddened crowd. The team wanted to push the opponents away, but to their surprise, the unexpected happened. The tear gas did not work on the drug addicts. The manager was surprised that the police really thought that the visitors' sense of euphoria was weaker than the possible pain. He instructed his colleague to collect the drugs and take the Asangpi to a safe place. The girl was distracted from her hopeless situation by a noise from the corridor. The officer she hated so much was running toward them. The guy accelerated and jumped into the crowd. Before the girl could say anything to him, the calm manager noticed an unexpected enemy. The police officer was already ducking in his direction. Kim Deyoung-soo was already holding a knife. And to his surprise, the manager was able to dodge the stab. Dong-cheol's radio was damaged. Kim realized that he had underestimated the enemy, which meant that the Phoenix team had been undergoing special training. He still couldn't understand how it happened. Meanwhile, the hall became noisy. K&P Soo began to push the crowd away by force. The manager was surprised at their attempt to overcome the crowd by force. Kim distracted Dong-shil from his thoughts, after which the manager's face showed surprise. The policeman instantly stabbed him twice. Ah Young couldn't believe her eyes. Dong-shil screamed in pain. The captain of the unit grabbed him by the neck and pushed him against the wall. He asked the manager why he had underestimated the enemy and turned away, but assured him that he would not die yet. But this did not mean that Kim would not hurt his opponent, and for his own safety, he stabbed his opponent with a knife. Dong-shil screamed in pain again. He was sure that everything was going according to his plan. The police officer asked the criminal not to move and just stand still against the wall. The surprised manager asked the guy who he was, but the officer had no intention of answering. Meanwhile, the KNP had finally dealt with the crowd, and they moved on to the top floor. The girl could not believe her eyes. The manager of the drug dealers was able to free himself. He put drug patches on his bloody hands. He was still shaking. The patches were able to stop the blood, but his condition was still serious. The furious manager asked if this fighter was also a member of the SOU unit, but the girl replied that she was also concerned about this question. After overcoming many opponents on the way to the drug dealer's boss's office, Kim asked Phoenix to come out for a conversation. Ah Young suggested that Dong-shil should turn himself in and get medical help. But the man was out of his mind and surprised by the number of police officers, saying that he hadn't seen such a crowd since he left the special unit. The girl began to realize who she was dealing with. The man greeted his students again. Then he pointed a gun at his former colleagues and introduced himself as Kim Dong-kil from Unit 29. The SOU captain gave the order to shoot at the enemy. This noise disturbed the newcomers to Team Kim. They were worried about whether their boss would be able to handle the situation alone. The girl was unhappy that they were given such a primitive task, and they resented such a boring special operation. In fact, they had not trained in vain. Their future enemy was already standing behind them. Choi asked the officers what they were doing in such a place. The team immediately jumped to a safe distance. Jo pulled out her stun gun and then fired at the enemy. To their surprise, the man stretched out his hand to meet the electricians. Catching them with his bare hand, he pulled the formidable weapon toward him. The team was shocked by this turn of events. According to the manager, Miss Phoenix is a much more serious opponent than these three. In Korea, there are quite strict rules regarding the use of firearms. They apply to the police as well, and it's not uncommon for officers to use firearms. So they are trained to use safer weapons like tasers or rubber bullets. Of course, it was impossible to surprise the manager of Dong-shil with such a weapon, even though they were capable of inflicting serious damage. The table that the enemy used to hide behind was quite reliable, and the team realized that they would not be able to defeat the enemy in this way. The commander ordered the SOU fighters to switch to live ammunition. Ah Hyung warned her former colleague that the next round of automatic fire would be with real bullets. So she offered the man to surrender and receive medical treatment, but the manager refused. He said he did not plan to stay in prison for the rest of his life without access to drugs. The girl did not understand why he believed that drugs were more valuable than life, and the man replied that his life had changed after one of the KNPSOU operations. He used his position to explore the area in search of the best product. Over time, his body began to get used to it, and he stopped enjoying the drugs. But at one point, the same woman appeared in front of him. Phoenix was interested in Dong-shil. She was interested in his resistance to drugs. She offered him a lollipop, saying it was made from the best product they had. She kindly invited him to try it, and the man was trembling with anticipation. He had finally found what he was looking for. It was just incredible for him. The girl asked him if he was satisfied. Then she offered to work together. He would have access to everything he wanted. The happy man agreed to cooperate. The girl set a condition that he would not eat more than one lollipop a day, as it was very life-threatening. Realizing that he was on the verge of death, the man decided to forget about his old promise. He had lost too much blood. He was too afraid that he would not be able to enjoy this product anymore. For him, it was worse than death. The team was ready to shoot, when their opponent pulled out a gun and then fired at the wall in front of them, then ricocheted and almost hit the unit commander. Ah Young was surprised that his bullet was able to make such a trajectory. The man stopped hiding behind the table and invited them to show their best. Dong Chul asked them to organize a lavish funeral for him, and the firefight between the SOU fighters continued. Meanwhile, Kim Gyung-soo fought with the bandits armed with firearms. He managed to get closer and grab the arm of one of the shooters, and knocked the gun out of his hand, and then shot the bandit in the leg. The guy quickly dealt with his opponents, using all possible blows. Sang-pi heard a noise in the corridor. The police officer was able to overcome all the opponents, and then entered the room. Phoenix's assistant said she had an idea who could have made so much noise. She wanted to meet him, but the guy came to her faster than she thought. He asked her if she had received his gift of a map of killers, and she asked who he was. Kim replied that he had been hearing this question a lot lately, but it didn't bother him. So the guy suggested that they reminisce about old times. Meanwhile, the SOU unit's firefight continued. Bullets were flying into the table. This time, they could easily pierce it. Dong Chul was wounded several times, and the captain told him to keep going. What happened next was a surprise to the girl. The manager of the drug dealers threw a table in their direction. Young realized that at this rate, their former colleague would die. Dong Chul instantly ran downstairs to the police special unit, and then launched an attack, before one of the officers could defend himself. So he caught a bullet from the enemy. The manager advised them not to let their guard down just because their enemy was barely breathing. The crazy man instantly approached the team captain. He said that she would not shoot in order not to injure her comrades. His red eyes were full of surprise. The girl instantly kicked him in the stomach, and the man flew away from the special forces. Young fulfilled her plan, and then opened fire on the enemy. Dong Chul fell to the ground. She asked her colleagues to check the condition of the wounded soldier. Unfortunately, he was no longer breathing. She was very disappointed with the loss. But the problems did not end there. Dong Chul was able to get up and saying that he was still alive. The man threw a grenade in the direction of the police. The captain recognized the smoke grenade, and then ordered the team to take safe positions. The whole station was covered in smoke. Despite their good equipment, the soldiers still had difficulty seeing through the smoke. Suddenly, a bullet hit one of the fighters. The soldiers did not understand how it happened, and the captain realized that the noise was not working in their favor. Dong Chul told the soldiers that their equipment had improved over time, but they were dumber than before. Their lack of experience and panic were not working in their favor. The man said he would teach them a lesson, and the price for this lesson would be their lives. Panic-stricken members of the team were firing, and the bodies of the soldiers fell in the smoke after successive shots. The girl could not guess where the enemy was firing from. Kim Hyung was scared for her life. It was her first time in such a difficult situation. Looking ahead, she saw a silhouette. She didn't know if it was friend or foe. It was Dong Chul. He could no longer continue the fight. After the girl let go of her fear, it was time to face reality. She was the only one who suffocated to death. After the fight, she was in a panic. It was the first time in her life that she felt such fear and despair, but she was unable to say anything except for exhausted moans. Suddenly, she was distracted by an unexpected noise from the tunnel. The second manager was trying to catch up with the 3 fighters of Kim Gyung-soo's team, and they were panicking that none of their fighting methods had brought the desired result. The man was furious at their behavior. Joe realized that even special training did not make it possible to resist such a monster. So she called her boss a liar. In fact, Bai Guang's secret training was quite simple. He told his slaves everything about the most important human organs. Using rubber bullets, he taught them to aim for the solar plexus, the back of the head, the groin, and the joints. And with sharp weapons, he recommended hitting the places with the most blood vessels. After another training session, the guy emphasized the importance of the knowledge they had gained. Using these techniques, most enemies will not be able to resist. But of course, there are those people who are exceptions to the rule. For Shui, this tactic looked ridiculous. The trio were running away from the enemy and begging their unit leader to help them. But in a moment they saw what was happening around them. They did not understand how this could have happened. Only the unit leader was still alive among the dead soldiers. After Shui caught up with his victims, he praised Dong Qiu for a good job. But when he noticed there was no response from his colleague, he realized that the battle hadn't gone as well as he expected. Meanwhile, Kim Gyung-hee, a legendary killer in the past, said hello to the former Mrs. Phoenix and asked where her new boss was. The girl didn't answer and asked who he really was. The guy replied that she was smart enough to have already guessed. Sang-pi replied that she wasn't sure, but she thought he was definitely an interesting person with some intriguing information. Taking something out from under her clothes, she said that, under different circumstances, she would not mind talking to him over a cup of tea. But the guy didn't let her finish and attacked the girl who was holding a patch with drugs. The girl did not have time to use her weapon and flew away from the blow. The guy understood perfectly well what her plan was during the friendly conversation. He realized that she was counting on her band-aid. The guy said that she should have just thrown the first punch and rushed back to the attack. He kicked her in the arm and told her she was wasting her time. The angry girl tried to control her emotions, and then tried to bite down on the pill containing the substance. But Kim was ready for it and grabbed her by the face. He asked her if it was okay to keep a pill in her mouth all day, and then took it out of her mouth. The girl decided to fight on her own and grabbed the guy with her legs. But her attempt to break the guy's arms with the help of drugs was in vain. There was a big difference in strength between them. After the last blow, Kim asked where the girl he came for was hiding. He said that there was no point in protecting a rat like her. Sang-pi replied that her bomb was not a coward. The guy agreed and said she was just a crazy drug addict. He asked again where Phoenix was, but suddenly stones were thrown at his back. He was surprised by what he saw behind him. There were children standing at the entrance to the room. They called him a bad guy. The girl said they were late. They should have come as soon as they heard the noise. And one of the kids was running to the boy. The girl didn't want Kim to hurt Mrs. P, but after a failed attempt at a knife attack, she was stabbed in the neck and then lost consciousness. The next two also went into battle. The guys with the bandages on their faces were also hit by the policeman. Kim asked Sang-pi what she would do next. She said she was finally able to use drugs. The angry guy asked if Miss Phoenix had authorized the use of children in their plan, and she said she was not sure. Gyung-soo decided to get serious and kicked the knife. He decided to finish off his enemy. He had known Sang-pi for a long time. The girl often watched him train. Buddha had high hopes for the boy. He asked the girl if this young man was really the new Bai Guang. She did not know how to answer for sure. In his opinion, the boy was stronger than the first Bai Guang, but he would not be able to kill the enemy. She thought that everything was ambiguous. But Buddha told her that she just had a weak brain due to drug use and did not notice an important detail. This guy could easily kill his opponent, but he just doesn't have that desire. The girl was surprised to say that this kid was just mocking a high-ranking fighter. She remembers when he came to their house. At that time, the first Guang had already defeated all the kids except him. The boss asked the girl to take another look at the fight. The guy wasn't just fighting. He left an infinite number of scars on his opponent's body. In the boss's opinion, no one is better than this child for the role of Bai Guang. During the fight, the girl finally realized she could feel this familiar fighting style. Her opponent resembled the same Big Guang. The girl was lying exhausted on the floor. Kim put his foot on her and then repeated his question about Phoenix. The girl thought that the guy would kill her anyway. But Kim said that if she answered well, her death would be painless. The first-generation Phoenix is known as Sang-P. After the girl left her position, Buddha handed it over to the new Phoenix. Usually after the rise of the new full moon, a ceremony of transferring the title is held, which ends with the death of a member of the previous generation. But the new Mrs. Phoenix decided not to kill Sang-P. They had a very different relationship. The previous generation Phoenix tried to poison her boss, but the girl easily noticed it and asked her colleague why she did it. Sang-P replied that she had no reason to hate her new boss. Phoenix started crying at the thought of everyone hating her. They tried to kill her because of her body weakness. She was looking forward to the full moon, but now they hate her because of her love for drugs. She turned to her predecessors and said that she had no reason to hate them, as they had gone through the same journey. She got up from her seat and offered a bet. She asked them to love her for drinking a glass of poison. Sang-P was surprised by this behavior of her boss. Phoenix drank every last drop. With a bloody face, she asked her colleague if she liked her now. Sang-P was only thinking about her survival. But when she saw her boss with tears in his eyes, she felt something called love for the first time. Sang-P told Kim that she could not risk the life of someone she loved. The second-generation Phoenix was the first person she felt love for. The guy realized that this was her final answer, and after that, he was done with her. He will have to find other people to interrogate about the location of Phoenix. Sang-P was able to say that her boss would be back, and then she said that the children were not her fault. So Kim shouldn't kill Miss Phoenix. Sang-P finally called the policeman by the name of Bi Guang. The guy replied that it doesn't depend only on him. His plans could radically change Phoenix's actions. Meanwhile, panic reigned on the ground floor. Manager Choi couldn't believe what had happened to Dong Shul. Jo Gyung-hee was worried about the captain's condition. They were trying to help their comrades. After slapping the captain, she asked her to pull herself together. She asked her partners to help her, but the guys said they had a problem. Upset by the loss of his comrade, Choi Sang-mook covered his body with narcotic patches and then went on the attack. The team did not know how to stop such a formidable opponent. Manager Choi threw two fighters back with one hand and then went to attack the defenseless Jo and Captain Ah Young. Jo Gyung-hee was still trying to revive her colleague. She was her last hope for salvation. Standing in front of the defenseless girls, he looked extremely angry. Jo cringed, expecting the worst. But what happened was something no one expected. Sang-mook's arm was sliced by an incredibly fast attack. Another fighter joined them, and it was Kim Gyung-soo. He warned the enemy that he shouldn't relax. After inspecting the room, the guy was surprised that a seriously wounded man was able to deal with an entire KNP unit. Apparently, he overestimated the police. Meanwhile, Choi decided to take revenge on his opponent. He threw a hard punch, but Kim put up a shield and said it must have hurt. The manager grabbed his arm in pain, and Kim turned to a trio of friends. He asked them to help the kids. He would take care of the rest. In the meantime, the manager picked up the lying clubgoers and offered to open fire. The guy did not refuse the offer and fired. The bullet flew next to the girl. The guy's shot hit the enemy's shoulder. In pain, he let go of his prisoners and grabbed his arm. Kim asked the enemy to calm down and said that he was not going to kill him. He said that all his comrades were already dead, and he was the only one who had a chance to survive. The officer's words made the drug gang manager very angry, and he rushed to attack the armed cop. but was instantly shot twice in the leg. The guy asked his colleagues to inform the base that they were going back. He underestimated the situation, and that's why a lot of SOU fighters were killed in the operation. He had higher expectations of his team, but it was nothing compared to what happened to the captain. She was completely broken. She was a deity compared to the other three, so he thought that he had overestimated her abilities. He told his comrades to just go back, but their conversation was cut short by a sudden noise. A motorcycle with a girl on it appeared right above him. She almost ran into him, and the guy started shooting at her, but the girl quickly knocked the weapon out of his hands, and then stopped nearby. The manager was very surprised to see her. It was Mrs. Phoenix. She was using a lot of band-aids at the same time. The three police officers recognized her immediately. The girl turned to her manager and asked him to gather the others and follow her. Finding a way to escape took her much longer than she thought. Upset, Choi told the girl that he was the only one who survived the police raid. The girl could not believe what he said. She saw her second manager nearby and Officer Kim confirmed what he said, saying that this was also true of her predecessor Sang-P. The girl was overwhelmed with hatred. Sitting on her motorcycle, she reached into her pocket. Then she took out drug bombs. She swore she would take revenge on him for all her colleagues. The guy was pleased with her fighting spirit and took the mask. They had known each other for a long time. The girl called Bi Guang her big brother. She sat down next to him and told him about the rumors that he had been punished by Mr. Buddha, and she was worried if he was okay. The boy did not say anything, but asked if she was okay. Her arms were scarred. She said it was her own fault for being so weak. Mr. Buddha told them that soon there would be an evaluation of the fighters, and the boy would lead the team. She said she was even a little jealous that he was promoted to U, and was given a name, Bi Guang, that sounds really cool. She asked if she could also achieve something like that, but the boy said that her dreams were too big. The girl said that the relationship between the U's is horrible, but if she ever managed to become one of the US, she promised to be still friendly with him. Back then, she could not even imagine what would happen in the future. Now she has no choice but to fight with her friend. The bombs thrown by the girl immediately created a cloud of smoke. Kim realized it was nerve gas, but the bigger problem was the obstruction of his field of vision. His arm was injured from the previous blow, but he could still use it. He barely managed to dodge the sudden attack of the girl on the motorcycle. The furious Phoenix asked the guy how long he would run away from her. His actions surprised the girl. He just ran to the stairs nearby. The girl asked if he seriously thought it would help him, and he would really be able to escape down the stairs. The guy was going up to the corridor of the upper floor. He was still following the smoke from the ground floor. Then Phoenix appeared on her motorcycle. The girl was horrified by what she saw. The bodies of her masked fighters were lying around the boyfriend. The guy offered to try to deal with him, and the girl stepped around the dead men. But there was a sharp turn down the corridor. The policeman praised the enemy for his good motorcycle driving skills, and then suddenly appeared above her. She didn't know what to do. Kim Young-soo grabbed hold of the girl and began to strangle his opponent. At first, the girl was holding his hands, but then she reached for the handlebars of the motorcycle and hit the gas, and she tried to throw the police officer off by speeding up, but the guy said at least he had a helmet. They both flew off the bike. Holding his back, the guy said that he would rather not repeat this trick again. The girl just shouted the usual question about who the hell he was. His appearance in her life completely ruined the girl's career and destroyed her plan to restore her reputation in front of the Buddha boss. The guy said he didn't know when it started, but she started blaming him for all her problems. She started following in Bai Guang's footsteps and doing what he said when they were kids. He told the girl that she shouldn't blame him for her mistakes. An angry Phoenix shouted at the guy to stop talking nonsense that she didn't understand. She asked him again who the hell he was, and the policeman calmly replied that he was Bai Guang. The girl still did not believe what he said. The guy asked Phoenix to turn herself in. He was planning to kill her, but she is in charge of the funds, and there may be transaction data left behind, so he was told to bring her in alive. She said to her to testify against all the shit she went through because of that damn monk, and to give them all the evidence related to that bastard. So if she does this, he will let her stay alive. The girl started laughing and asked if Bi Guang Opaya had a hidden disciple, a copper at that. The guy answered, "You of all people should know that I didn't have any disciple. You did a shit ton of your secret investigations on me when you became you. Did you really think I would not notice that tail following me around on my missions?" The girl had no answer for him. There were only two people in Huaguksa that hated that monkey bastard. It was Phoenix and Bai Guang. Filled with anger, she began to shout that her appa had died long ago at the hands of Buddha. Mr. Buddha even showed her his corpse and said that she would be next in case if she wouldn't listen to him. The boy said that this one was really hard to believe, but the girl continued her words, and then said, "It seems like Bi Guang Appa didn't tell his disciple this." Remembering her childhood friendship, the girl used the new patches and said she hated Bi Guang even more than her boss Buddha. The girl rushed into the fight, and the boy stood in a stance ready to defend himself. Phoenix swung her hand out, but Kim was the first to kick her in the stomach. But he didn't know that she had narcotic gas in her pocket. It instantly filled the entire corridor and again limited their line of sight. The guy did not count on this turn of events. The girl inhaled a full lung and said that she felt much better. She stabbed her opponent in the stomach with the thought that there is nothing better for her than drugs. No matter how much pain she was in, even severe injuries, drugs always helped her get rid of all her problems. Even in the worst situations, when she was not feeling well, drugs were the only incentive to keep fighting. The girl was able to deliver a strong punch to the enemy's face. She broke her enemy's tactical goggles, and then she screamed with joy and enjoyment of the situation. She was overwhelmed with pleasant feelings and could not contain her pleasure from euphoria, but she did not know the difference between medicinal and narcotic drugs. Drugs did not cure her pain, but simply changed her perception of everything around her. She did not understand how her opponent was still standing. In fact, reality did not change. The guy was still standing in front of her. Suddenly, she screamed in pain. She realized that the situation had not changed at all. She thought she had already started to win the battle. It turned out that it was a mistake of perception, and she panicked and reached into her pocket for the next dose of the drug. Bai Guang contacted Phoenix and said that it was a shame. She should have given up in that situation. The boy's words made her think about her life, and she could not accept being called a disgrace. Taking more patches with drugs in her hands, she shouted that he knew nothing about her. But the guy just calmly replied that he knew everything about his girlfriend. He said he knew her much better than anyone else, and knocked the patches out of her hands. In a panic, the girl tried to catch her favorite drugs, but the guy asked her to stop and just turn herself in to the police. She didn't have any better options than that. So the guy just hit her on top of the head with his heavy fist. He had no other choice. She was killing herself. Sitting on the floor, the girl asked him for more drugs, and Kim promised to give her another dose if she agreed to surrender to the police. The girl said that it was better to die here, as her boss's anger was worse than death. But the guy said that her predecessor, Sang P, had asked him to fulfill her last request. She begged him to let Phoenix live. The girl told the policeman that if he was really Bi Guang, he would not have killed Sang P and would have been able to get as much useful information from her as possible. But the guy replied that she had used children, and judging by the girl's reaction, she did not know that. After these words, the girl understood why the policeman killed her colleague, but she could not accept the fact that he was Bai Guang. The guy asked her if it was just about the Buddha boss. and then assured Phoenix that she shouldn't worry because he was going to deal with him. The girl laughed when she heard the guy's words. She couldn't even imagine it. She shouted that even Bi Guang couldn't do it, and that a policeman has no chance of taking down a tyrant like her boss. The guy replied that there was really nothing left of his body. The long years of training he had to endure as a child made him much stronger. His body remembered all the wounds and experiences. But his life was over after the last mission. It was called the Special Operation True Religion. During it, he was seriously injured, and the girl remembered it perfectly. However, his new body is different from the previous one. His training was always accurate, and that's why he feels free now. There are no scars or torture marks on his body. This body is just perfect for Bai Guang. He is lucky that reincarnation did not take place in the body of some weakling like Zhou Guanghe. It is even hard for him to imagine what the result would be. The guy said that after he completed his adaptation in the new body and enough training, he would be able to gain enough strength to finally finish off that idiot monk. The girl finally started to believe in the boy's words. She began to realize that it was really Bai Guang. The guy confirmed her guesses and offered to turn himself in to the police, or die right here and right now. The girl hesitantly replied that she did not know what to do. The team didn't know if their captain could handle the enemy, but they had to hurry, as help would arrive in 30 minutes. Looking at the wounded manager, they thought that he should get medical attention as he had lost too much blood. The exhausted man said in an angry tone that he would kill anyone who laid a finger on him. But the girl dared to start dressing his wounds. Shou was very surprised. Confiding in the police, he asked them to take a band-aid from his pocket and stick it on his body. The girl did not understand what kind of nonsense he was talking about. But the man in pain asked her to hurry up and do it. Zhou Guanghe said that it was about drugs, and she didn't know how she could give them to a person with such an addiction. A voice behind her agreed with her. 2 silhouettes appeared at the entrance to the club. They were the clan's killers, and they said that drugs are for idiots. The manager of the drug cartel instantly panicked. He started shaking, and the surprised girl asked who these strangers were. The men went to the meeting and asked Sangmuk what happened to him. They said that his strong body was a formidable weapon, but now he had turned into a weak bastard. In fact, he was supposed to kill the drug addict Phoenix, whom these guys hated so much. The guy remembered his conversation from the past. His boss had asked him if he really supported the Lespedeza brothers, and if so, he came to her for revenge. The girl said that she had something better to do than to die. She asked Sangmuk if he would help her. The 2 killers continued to humiliate the wounded man for his miserable appearance. He was like this because of Mrs. Phoenix. They warned him that this could happen. One of the brothers said that women are generally innocent, but Phoenix is a damn drug addict. But the other guy decided to correct him. He said that women were useless creatures who could not pick up any heavy objects. He believed that their only strength was their legs. The policeman watched this discussion with extreme surprise. A frightened and exhausted Choi asked what the Lespedeza brothers were doing at Phoenix headquarters. They angrily replied that they had come to kill the drug addict and asked where she was. Meanwhile, Kim was carrying the weakened girl on her shoulders. She said it reminded her of her childhood and asked if he remembered the day they met. The guy responded by asking her to be quiet and save her strength to surrender to the police. Their first meeting was at Buddha, and the monk told Bai Guang that she had passed the test. So now they would work as a team, and he needed to help her get used to the temple. The boy tried to train the girl, but her body was too weak. Young Guang did not understand how such a weak girl could survive. Phoenix did not know how to answer. Then she said that she was the only one who survived after drinking their boss's poison. But the guy said that her immunity to the poison was not enough, and she was too weak to survive in such a cruel place. She began to swear that she would do everything possible to survive. She didn't want to die at the hands of her boss. Such a lust for life surprised the guy. He looked at the girl with confused eyes. He said he would keep the fight a secret and asked her to get to her feet. He said that, after the ordeal, he promised himself to always take care of his future colleagues. So he promised to support her in all her difficulties. The girl gave the guy her little finger and said that her mother taught her to make promises to other people like that. However, it didn't work out the way she wanted. The boy could do nothing when they tried to kill her with poison again. He just watched the torture in silence. She knew that he would not keep his promise, because she realized that it was impossible to protect her and survive at the same time. She should have recognized that the monk was to blame for all her problems, but she continued to blame her friend. The guy said that she had misunderstood everything, and he had not broken his promise to save her from death, because she was still alive. Meanwhile, the brothers began to interrogate their colleague. Ji-young-hee asked her friends to stop the killers. They took up their shields. The formidable enemy rushed into the fray. He delivered a very powerful kick. Lee and Huang flew back in an instant. The boy looked at the girl and asked her to sit quietly while they eliminated the rat of their clan. Squeezing Shoi's hand, one of the brothers said that he used to admire him. The manager was shaking with pain and holding one of the red patches. The man said that he never ceased to disappoint him, but he allowed Sang-mook to use the drug. He wanted to see what it would do to his colleague. Shoi put a band-aid on his neck, and then took a swing, saying that he didn't want to disappoint just Miss Phoenix. The injured man had no chance to dodge the blow from one of the brothers. The man with an extremely strong body said that drugs lead to hell. After this blow, he told the team of police officers that it was their turn. The members of the special unit said nothing, but looked at the terrified soldiers. The Lespedeza brothers said that they had plenty of appetizing weak losers waiting for them. The girl was confused and asked why appetizing, but one of the brothers said that he didn't eat women and she shouldn't worry about it. He then looked at the boys and said that they had pretty good bodies and shouldn't hide them under their special forces suits and equipment. He pointed his finger at the frightened Huang and asked him what kind of sport he was playing. Confused, the boy replied that he had been boxing for 10 years. Young-hee did not understand why her colleague was talking to this killer. She angrily called him an idiot. While clapping in the boat, one of the brothers said that it was great. He thinks the guy has a nice body, and he likes it. Then he turned to the fearful Lee. Young-hee asked her friend why he should respond to a psychopath. But one of the brothers asked the girl not to disturb them. Suddenly, he noticed Ah-young sitting on the ground. He said he could see her body well and said she was in great physical shape. The captain's strong body caught the interest of one of the brothers, while the other immediately attacked the captain. He grabbed the girl by the neck. Joe tried to stop him and begged him to let go of his colleague. Meanwhile, the other brother had already managed to break the arm of one of the guys. The situation was dire. The brothers decided to start their ritual of thanking them for lunch. Meanwhile, Phoenix tried to find out from Bai Guang what he meant when he said that she was the only survivor of all the children for a reason. She thinks she was saved by her resistance to drugs. He replied that since they became partners, he had realized something. No matter how much effort she puts into training, she would still die at the hands of a cruel monk. He was constantly haunted by this thought. The first time Bai Guang realized that he was worried about his friend. He did not like the way he was treated and broke his wooden sword, and then attacked the man. But Guang was able to catch his stick right in front of his neck. He said that he should calm down, even if he was chosen to be the next head of the killers. He was still a weak child. He said he would tell him how to save the girl from death. He knows what kind of poison they use, and if she starts taking the poison and keeps increasing the dose, she will become resistant to it. The boy did not understand what his senior colleague wanted from him, but the first Bai Guang thought he was smart enough to know that he was right to let him live. The guy was able to get help from his predecessor and thus gained access to the list of poisonous herbs. And then he was able to train the girl. She was always happy with the rice that the boy brought her. She always thought it tasted bitter, but the boy could not tell her his secret, and that was the reason why she survived several years later. The girl was shaking and could not believe what he was saying. He reminded her how she suffered from fever and rashes all over her body, while her body was developing immunity. She asked why he hadn't told her about it before, but the guy said that he was afraid that she would tell him about it one day after another dose of drugs, in which case they would both be finished. Buddha thought that the girl was born with drug resistance, like the first Phoenix Esang PP, so he drugged her to raise a new generation. Meanwhile, he planned a secret escape without the clan's knowledge. He went to the girl's room to take her with him. The girl did not understand where her brother Bai Guang wanted to go at night. He tried to explain to her that they should hurry, but the girl was already on drugs and said that for her, the temple was heaven. The guy was very wrong about her. The girl said that just going for a walk was boring. She had something better for her appa. Unfortunately, drugs changed his girlfriend forever. He regretted all his attempts to save the girl after seeing her change into a crazy drug addict. The girl asked him why he didn't run away himself, and he wasn't sure how to answer her. Their conversation was distracted by screams from the first floor. The girl thought it was Sangmuk. They sped up their run, the girl shouting to her colleague to stop. But what they saw brought confusion to their faces. The brothers began to bite the bodies of the exhausted soldiers. Jeonghee shouted to her colleague to save the policeman. The childhood friends realized that they were the Les Spedeza brothers. These madmen trying to eat their opponents.